Welcome to Homeschool Your Way. I'm your host, Jana Cook, and Bookshark's community manager. Today's episode has been almost over a year in the making. I first heard our guest at a parenting conference, and I was drawn to her depth of knowledge about internet safety for children. While I myself am not super big on online gaming or even social media, if you can believe that, I do have three teenage daughters, and I was not prepared for the invasiveness of what the internet and social media could be in their lives. So when I heard Fareedah Shahid talk about all of the things that parents can prepare themselves for and know about to keep their kids safe online, I knew that her knowledge would be so helpful to our listeners. So let me introduce you to Fareedah Shahid, aka Cyber Fareedah.
Oh my
Good
gosh, thank you so
morning.
much for having me. Good morning.
I am just thrilled for several reasons. Obviously, personal reasons, because it's just not my thing. And as much as I don't want it to be my thing, as a responsible parent, I feel like we have to make it our thing. And I believe that your message really resonates with that. And we will get into that. But also, your personal story is very inspiring. I felt like our listeners could just really glean so much from this episode and the information that you have and just who you are as a person, because I've really enjoyed spending time with you preparing for this podcast. So
Oh my
I hope
gosh.
that that is, people walk away with that same feeling after listening to this today.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I loved talking to you. And I guess what it would they would say the green room and the back room before we started recording. So I might have a professional background in cybersecurity awareness and threat intelligence. And then this is the background that most people are interested in. It's my personal background. So I grew up as an online gamer. When I was 13, my mom set me down and had a talk with me about internet safety and don't talk to strangers, don't share your name, don't share your photo, just play the game. She didn't even really want me to play the game, but I've been begging for it for years. And when I finally got on, I did not listen to anything that she said because that advice as a kid is like stupid advice, to be honest. Right? It makes sense when you're a parent to tell your kids that, and and I stand by telling your kids that. However, when it comes to different activities that your kids may be involved in online, they may feel like, ugh, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just regurgitating what they heard, that you should tell your children. And a lot of teens feel that way. And I absolutely would encourage parents to talk to their teens to be like, what internet safety advice that I give you or the school gives you that you feel like is old news, is not the full picture, is way more nuanced. That can give you an understanding of how they're seeing the world because they may be involved in things that you don't know about because they don't believe the internet safety advice that you're giving them. And that's what happened with me. I started talking to predators because, of course, when you talk to strangers, there are good people, bad people, beautiful people, and ugly people. And so I met the whole spectrum. There are people that I'm still friends with till today. We went through marriages, divorce, miscarriages, children, college, jobs, traveling. And then also there are people who really impacted my life as a kid, and I had to heal a lot from their interactions.
I think that what parents may not realize is that we can have all of these safety features, and the more I learn about how kids can get around them, the things that they can do just boggles my mind. What your message tends to be is really connecting with your kids so that when the information or when the events are in the moment, they have connection with their parent that, yeah, maybe they'll slip up. Yeah, maybe they will talk to a stranger. But it's not just, oh, my parents don't know what they're talking about. It's, I have a relationship with my parents, so I know that I can come to them with my mistakes. And I've had to kind of learn that and relearn that as a parent, as my children have been in different phases and ages. But it's something that I think needs to be brought to the forefront of even parents who homeschool, because we may be under the illusion that we have somehow kept our children safe from these things and could be completely unaware of what's actually going on behind closed doors. I was always one of those parents that were like, oh, I don't want to ever be blindsided. Like, just give it to me straight. I don't like, I would rather know the ugly and deal with it than, flour over it and spray some air freshener and just be like, everything's fine.
Well, I love that you brought that up because I was at this point when I was playing online games and talking to strangers, I was being homeschooled. Technically speaking, it was homeschooled. I mean, I was doing independent studying. So my dad had a job in the Middle East. I lived in the Middle East. I lived in like an American compound. I went to private school, and then my mother put me into like international independent studying school that was based in the United States. And so at that point, when I started getting super deep into the online world, that is when I was at home and doing my own independent studying. So I wasn't even really in the school to begin with, right? So I already had my own curriculum. I would play online games after I finished all my homework. I would mail in my tests because then they didn't really have it on the internet. I don't know why, but whatever. I'm not like I'm only 27 years old, but you've lived between like all the different technology changes. But yeah, so everything was done like on paper, and I'd have to mail in my tests and my results, and then it would be graded that way, and then my grade would come in the mail.
I love it. So many, the evolution of homeschooling and independent study and online schooling. My kids laugh when I told them that one summer I took a correspondence course through my community college and they sent me a box of VHS tapes that I had to watch the
Yes.
lectures and then do the Scantron
Oh
tests.
my
And
gosh.
let me just say, it doesn't work if you wait till the last minute.
No, it does not. Yeah, I had to do like my exams a couple weeks before the school year ended because it didn't really matter when I did it, so long as I got it in by a certain date. And then it needed to be a month ahead of time because of course it's from going from Saudi Arabia all the way to I think it was Wisconsin. I'm not really sure actually. And then back to there and it was a whole thing. So it has to go through the military and they have to scan it and it's the whole thing. I'm like, so I
Yeah.
had to do everything really way beforehand. And that's how I managed my time. Actually, being homeschooled and independent studying and gaming online, I was able to manage my time because I wanted to spend as much time gaming as possible. And so because I had that schedule, I made sure I got everything done so that I could game for the rest of the day. And so my mom was like, look, so long as you get your work done and you do every single thing that you're supposed to do, you can game for like 12 hours if you want to. And maybe she didn't say that, but that's what I had in my head. And I got away with it. And I got my A's. So I mean, it didn't really I was good.
Well, and as an encouragement for homeschool parents, because part of the reason we do choose a different way of educating is so that our kids can pursue their passion. Walk us through your educational journey. And because I really feel like that is all of these things that you're saying are laying the foundation for your now cyber Frida persona.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. So gaming, and I tell people this all the time, directly impacted my career in tech. So it was at first my mother felt like she did not like video games at all. She would not let me touch it. I didn't watch TV, by the way. I didn't even listen to music. I didn't watch Disney as a kid. The major thing that I was doing was reading. So I had like 3,000 books. 1,000 of it was my books personally. I had my own library in my room. And then 2,000 of it was like my mother's books. And so I was reading all the time and I got into gaming, and gaming directly helped me understand the tech world and what's going on, especially mobile gaming and how it'll impact the world. And I truly believe that the world that we have now is built on gamers. Everything that you see, your car, the traffic light system, your computers, social media, everything is built because of a gamer built something. So I always tell parents that if you want your kids to have a phenomenal career in the future, the interest that they have that sounds stupid, even like wanting to watch Mr. Beast on YouTube. Even if you don't like Mr. Beast, you can block Mr. Beast. That's totally fine. Like I'm all for blocking him, especially with everything that's going on right now. However, if they like a YouTuber, they like someone on Twitch, they like an influencer, that could be a catalyst to them building a career that they like. And that's what happened with me. I got super interested in technology, culture, language, understanding how people operate online. And that is what got me into my career. All of my experiences is what corporate really loved about me and what I did. And that's how I got hired. I stayed there for 5 years. I built my business because of it. So highly recommend. And I never get to really talk about this aspect of it, but yeah, I mean, I was homeschooled and I loved it. It was the best thing.
It does open up so many avenues. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge advocate for it. That's why we're here. But one thing that I think parents miss is this idea of, especially a classical education. Oh, you talked about reading, and Bookshark is a literature-based homeschool curriculum, and there's this thread, this underlying vein of classical education and reading, but we also live in a world that is driven by tech. So how do we, as parents, prepare our children for the world of tech, but still encourage the love of literature, the love of that classical education, and how they actually can work really well together. I think you're living proof of that. And so being able to help parents be comfortable with the idea, of their kids gaming, even though they may be anti-gamers. I'm like I really am an anti-gamer. I think my brother and I had Sega. Like that's how bad it was. And we would play like forever and then we put it down and not play for years. So how do we as parents accept that this is a reality and we can do it safely with our kids?
Well, if your child is really into it, then you kind of have no choice other than to accept it in some way, shape, or form. If they're not into it, you don't have to accept it. You can move on. If they're super into it, but you think that it's bad for them, then I would one have conversation with yourself and reconcile with yourself whether what's good, bad, pros and cons, and then go and have the conversation with your kids. You don't want to come into the conversation saying convince me, but sometimes it's actually good to tell your kids to convince me. So they can go and do the research, they can read books, they can research online, they can give the pros and cons of gaming, and then they can say based off of the cons, here's what I'm going to do to protect myself. And that's one of the exercises I recommend in my community for people to do, is if you're really concerned about your child and what they'll do, is have them do the research and come back to you and try to convince you. But it's better if you're already in the mindset of you're debating with yourself and then you go to them and say convince me. But honestly, I would say if you truly believe that it's not good for your child, then it's not good for your child. I am team gut feeling, right? You are the expert in your child, you're the expert in your family. There are certain children that will not, like, they won't benefit from gaming the way that I did or that many people that I work with do. I have parents in my community where they completely pulled off Roblox and Minecraft because they felt like their child was they were saying things, they were learning words that were inappropriate and they kept saying it. Their personality was changing, similar to like watching videos online, YouTube stream, whatever, where they become that person. They have certain attitude, they have a short temper, and they don't like the way that they're operating. I probably was like that in some way because there are ways about me where I'm like, oh, this is an environment that I'm in. I'm going to mold myself to that environment because I moved a lot as a kid. So it's a survival mechanism. However, I still maintained who I was and I still did whatever I wanted to do. I was very hard-headed. So, I mean, it really does depend on your child. So you don't have to convince yourself. If you truly believe it's not good for your child, it's not good for your child. I just would say there is a chance that if your child is super into gaming and they're not allowed to, they may be doing things behind your back. So knowing how to protect your child, even if you feel like, oh, there's no way that they're doing it, it's better to do it that way because I was a sneaky kid. And if my mom said no to something, my dad said no to something, I figured out a way. I just never told them about it. I wasn't supposed to be talking to strangers online. I just did it on my own time.
For parents who may find themselves in a situation already, so maybe we're talking to them after the fact, like, oh, I've had a horrible situation. We are trying to rebuild trust because of these things that had happened. Um, I think it's important, and maybe you would agree, like, this really has nothing to do. Typically, it can. Nothing to do with us as parents, right? Like we love our kids. We put the protections in that we think are working and we're unaware of how kids are getting in the back door of these things and they have holes in their brain so they think it's harmless and they don't really understand and they think we're out of touch. But it really isn't about blaming. It's not about what did I miss, like I mean we all as parents we always have to look at that, but once we've decided like, hey, I did what I thought was right and it still didn't work. It still had negative consequences in our family. So your personal story kind of hits on that a little bit that your parents were there, they were vested, they were paying attention to you. I mean,
I was the only child. I mean, so I mean, of course they had work, but I was their only focus. So they had all of their energy onto me, and I still did whatever I wanted to do. So
Yeah. So sometimes it's just the kid. Like I don't
Literally.
I think that's great to just take that weight off of us as parents. Like, and again, I'm not saying like you don't have any responsibility in your parenting. Of course you do. But if you're here and you're listening to this, obviously you're vested into doing what's best for your kids. So things are going to happen that are out of our control, even with our kids. And as a parent who has 19-year-olds, making their own way and making their own decision, it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes when it is not the decision that you would make and it was not the choice that you thought your kids were going to make. So, that's talking about life consequences. And if we back up and just say, that can happen even in younger years, and we really just do our best.
And if you're human and you're opening up to your children and you're vulnerable with them, that's one way that you can build trust back. So when I was talking to strangers, I didn't tell my mom for like 3 to 4 years. And finally, when I was like 16 years old, I was going to meet somebody who I met on a video game, and I was going to meet them at the park. So originally, I had planned to go meet and I wasn't driving at this time, so I was being dropped off by my mom to my friend's house. And so I had packed my bags. And then I was telling her, like, hey, by the way, I'm packing my bags, but also, like, I'm going to go meet this guy that I met on a video game. This is the first time she's ever even really known that I was really talking to people online like that. And so she was like completely shocked. And the only reason why I told her was because I was her only child, one. I really worried about her and I wanted her to know where I was. So I just wanted to know that, yeah, you're dropping me off at my friend's house, but also I'm meeting this guy, like, on Saturday. You dropped me off on Friday and I'm meeting him like Saturday afternoon. And she was like, okay, like, what's going on? And so in that moment, I thought that she was going to be like what you think a parent would be in that moment. There's frustration. There's like, why would you do that? That's crazy. How did you meet this person? Show me the text messages. Maybe yelling, screaming, throwing the door, not throwing the door, but slamming the door, whatever it is. I mean, she's not an angry person. She's never raised her voice at me. She's raised her voice in terms of like trying to get my attention, but she's never yelled at me as a kid, like ever. And so, but I just felt like she's gonna be mad. And she wasn't. She was just like, well, she was mad, but she didn't show that to me. And she just said, okay, like, what's his name? Where did you meet him? What do you like about him? What does he like about you? What if you shared? Like, what decided, what made you feel like you want to meet him? And I felt like I was talking to my friend. I genuinely was like, is this my mother? Like, is this, I don't know who this person is right now. And it made me want to spill more. And I didn't tell her too much. And she knew I was a very private person. So she did not ask to see our text message thread, and it wouldn't have showed her anyways. And she did, I would have shut down and just left the house and probably moved in with him or whatever, because I was just dramatic as a kid. And I was just like, why do you want to be in my life? Why do you want to know all these things? It's not none of your business. So at least she just knew how I was as a kid, and she tread lightly and just asked me a couple of questions. And then at that moment, I was like, oh, she really cares about me. Because in my head, a friend, and this is why a lot of kids talk to their friends, is because their friends just listen with there's no judgment, there's no control, there's no why did you do this? Why did you do that? Some friends will do that. And it makes you feel like, oh, let me go back up. And so because she felt like a friend in that moment, I spilled all the details to her. And then I ended up not meeting the guy. I ended up going to my friend's house. Thankfully, she didn't stop that from happening, which is another reason why I trusted her. And just for me, I'm not saying you shouldn't stop it. It's just for my this is my own story. And I didn't text. I think I texted him, but I can't remember. But we never really talked much again after that. And after that, when I was talking to people online, I would tell my mom, I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm talking to this person. They said that. And she's like, oh, that's interesting. And if she didn't feel a red flag on it, she would move on. But if she felt like they were asking, it's a situation that's not good, she would tell me. She'd be like, like that doesn't seem really great. I remember as a kid, this is what I went through. In high school, I went through that. In college, I went through that. So I just felt like I was talking to a person. For my entire childhood, she was such a perfect mom. She was reading all the books, reading all of the articles, everything to be the perfect parent. And in that moment, she wasn't perfect. She felt like she was getting divorced from my father. This is when I told her the situation about talking to a predator. We had moved to a different country. She was like falling apart emotionally. She didn't feel like she was a good parent. She felt like she failed me, especially because she's learning that now I'm going to go and talk to meet some stranger online. And so in that moment, she felt like if she gave any push to me, if she was judging me, if she was like going in on the mistakes that I made, that it would push me to go to him versus going to her. And that's exactly what have happened. If she yelled at me, if she made me feel small, if she made me feel judged, I just would have called him and been like, oh my God, my mom's so upset. Like, I can't, let's meet a day earlier. And maybe I would have stayed over his house and he would have consoled me. And I wouldn't have realized that he is the problem, not my mother. And so she knew that in the moment. And that's what changed my entire life. And that's where the safe method was born. This is where my passion for keeping kids safe online was born because of that one moment.
Well, let's talk about what has come from that moment. So you have you call it the safe method, and we were talking earlier these pillars of safety. Like, what is the groundwork that parents can lay either, proactively or even in the cleanup stages? Like, where do we even start?
Whew. Okay, so the safe method is like it's four pillars of keeping your child safe online. You don't need to be tech savvy. You don't need to know more than your kids to do this. The first part is safe spaces. So you're giving your child a safe space by first giving yourself a safe space. So the self-care that you're giving yourself, the moment, the 5 moments of breathing, or not 5 minutes of breathing, or 30 seconds of, okay, wait a minute, let me reframe my mindset. So safe spaces. The second is accountability. So if you tell me this, I won't be mad at you, don't be mad at them. And when you do get mad, even though you said you're not going to get mad because you're a human being, you can come back and say, hey, I apologize. It just made me feel this way. I really care about you. So you're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up. It's great actually when you mess up. I always say that like messing up is perfect because that shows your child that they can mess up and come back too. And the third one is fun. So adding fun, adding enjoyment into your space actually protects your kids. So if they're talking about Roblox with you and you have a moment, listen to them. If you don't have a moment, say, hey, after dinner I can talk. I'm a little bit busy at the moment, but I can't wait to hear what happened on Roblox, even if that's the last thing you want to hear. If you play the game with them, that's a version of fun that protects them online. And then E is empathy. So putting yourself in their shoes, I'm giving them advice from a place of empathy and understanding because you went through something. Even if you didn't game online as a kid, even if you did not have gaming online as a child, even if it's like completely a different world, you still have experiences as a human being. So giving them those stories of what you went through can help them and help you.
One of the things about he's like, don't talk to strangers online, it's like that's like our first thing. And I think I'm a people person. And so my kids have always seen me talk to strangers. I mean, that's what I do, right? I actually really enjoy it. Like, I want to
It's the
expand my
best.
bubble. I want to know people. So I couldn't necessarily say, don't talk to strangers because everyone's a stranger until they're a friend or an enemy, right? Like you and walking alongside your kid and showing them. I do recall, and I still say this to my 15-year-old. I'm like, I'll poke my head in and I'll be like, you're not talking to someone you don't know, right? Like, no, mom. I mean, in a sense, that does kind of shrink the exposure that our kids do have to good people. Maybe there is a kid who is immune compromised and can only find friends online or in a remote area, and so there is such a balance for this kind. Well, there's a balance in everything, but it's such a balance in this particular area because we don't want to scare our kids. I mean, my girls flat out told me, they're like, do you just want us to be afraid of everything? And I was like, oh my
Like there.
gosh, no. What am I doing wrong that that's how it's being portrayed? Because I want my three daughters to be fearless and to do whatever it is that they want, with wisdom and safety. And so it's interesting how what as a parent, if we're not communicating with our kids, if we think we have to just know it all and present it as that way. I think I'm more of the generations like our dads, worked. They didn't have a lot to do with child rearing. I mean, they were, if you're fortunate, your dad was around, but then our generation, it felt like the partners were equally involved in all of the things with the kids, which I think is a great evolution of this family unit. But we don't know it all. I mean, we don't have to pretend. There is nothing in the parent manual that says don't let them know that you are unsure of any answer you give them, and
And
so
also they can
just
feel it though. Like, so
yeah.
you know that, like, even if we were to think back to us when we were kids, like, you know, the moments where your parents were saying something and it just was complete BS. There are moments where you didn't know, especially as a young kid, but as you grow up, you're looking at them and you can see through. I mean, kids can see through BS a mile away. And so don't even pretend that you do know. Like, the more honest you are with them, the better it is to protect them online. You may feel like, oh my God, if I appear as the expert, if I do all this research and I come to them with facts, this is not about facts. First of all, their frontal lobe is not developed. So facts mean nothing. So facts mean something to you because you've went through all the experiences and you know what it is. But their frontal lobe, like you said, there's holes in our brains. So the frontal lobe is not there yet. So facts don't, it's always feelings over facts every single time. And they can feel that you don't know what you're saying. They can feel that you've read something online and you're just regurgitating what they said. They can feel that it's inauthentic. And so then they go, oh, so if you can live an inauthentic life, then I can. And so
Mm,
that is what we do as kids. It's like, oh, so you're deciding, you're putting up a front with me. I'll put a front with you, and I will do whatever I want in the back end because you're doing whatever you want in the back end. I know you're not perfect. You know I'm not perfect. So if we're going to be inauthentic, let's just give ourselves a perfect version of ourselves in front of each other and then
mm.
do whatever we want on the side. So if you're approaching it like, and it's okay, there are going to be times where they just feel like, oh, do you want me to be afraid of everything? And they probably don't feel like that. They're just being dramatic, you know? Like, they don't know how to communicate in the therapy way that we know how to communicate now, right? It's like, ugh, I feel like you don't love me. Like, you don't love me. I hate you. They're just like, you're just being dramatic as a kid. But you know that, like, in your heart of hearts, if your child really were to sit and think about it, it's like, no, actually, my mom isn't wanting me to be afraid of everything. She's just really cares about me and really wants me to be safe and is like, oh my God, be careful about this, make sure about this. It's a human response. So they will figure that out as they get older. There are just certain things that they will just say in the moment.
I also think that letting your kids know their value to you. I recall we didn't really do sleepovers. I just like, let's just mitigate anything that could
Yes.
happen at these things. Um, so my daughter was really upset that there was this birthday party and we weren't going to let them go. And I just looked at her, and in that moment, I said, what we were at a gas station. She was upset with me. And I said, I had my wedding ring on, and I looked at a stranger. I said, should I just go give this stranger my wedding ring to hold overnight? I'm sure
Mm,
he'll give it back to me. And she was like, why would you do that? Like, that's ridiculous. I said, do you know how much more to me you are than my wedding ring that's replaceable? Why would I
mm,
just give you over to a stranger? I mean, because the birthday, we had no relationship with this family regardless. Like, who just invites strangers' kids over? Like, whatever. But in that moment, that is what she could relate to in her 8-year-old brain. Not that my mom didn't want me to have fun, or she just is a control freak and she's, scared of everything. It was showing her the value that I place on her as a person. And I think the same goes in the gaming world. Like, okay, yes, you want to talk to people, and yes, there's, we can then let's talk about it afterwards because I value you and I want to make sure that nobody else is, I hate to say taken advantage of, but whatever, like using words that are age appropriate. But I think that that's not something that was communicated openly, I don't think, when I was a kid. I know my parents loved me, it was there, but it's that making those connections on an age appropriate level for them to understand. Like, they're not going to understand, because of the holes, like you're saying, the facts. But if you can say, hey, well, okay, I'll take your prized possession, the thing that you love the most, I'm just going to give it to a stranger, and then we'll just see, hopefully, the just trust that they're gonna bring it back.
that's such a good example. Hopefully, you don't mind me using that in the future because I
You
absolutely love that.
absolutely can.
That is such a great example because it goes into their feelings and not facts because facts don't work. And to be honest, if we were to be very honest with ourselves, facts don't work with ourselves either. Because if I were to come and just tell you all the facts about predators and whatever, it doesn't hit your heart and you don't remember it at the end of the day. But when I tell you about my story and my thoughts and what went on and the families that I work with, it resonates with us. It stays with us for the rest of our lives. I don't remember all the facts, and the only facts that I remember are the ones that are connected to stories. And so for your kids is the same way. We all work the same way. And to be honest, wanting to talk to strangers is developmentally appropriate, right? Was as they grow older, they're about to go to college, they're meeting new people, they want to know how other people think. And so instead of saying don't talk to strangers, you're making it normal to talk to strangers as they get older. Not when they're 8 years old, but now they're in middle school, they're online. If they're online and they're gaming and the chat is not off, and honestly, if they're gaming, regardless, you start talking. about strangers as if it's a normal thing. And then you go, oh, if you see this red flag, if they say that and they make you feel uncomfortable in this way, and then you can come tell me if you want to. But do know that your child may never come to tell you because one, it's embarrassing. They may have some shame, they may have some guilt. They don't really want to talk to you about it because they don't want to know, they don't want to even think about you being judgmental about the circumstances. So how can you give them a safe space in the household to heal when you don't know what's going on? That's another thing that I really am very passionate about because they may not tell you. I didn't tell my mom all these things. And she's still, till this day, learning random things that has happened to me at 27 years old. Not at this age right now, but like as a kid, she's like, what? That happened? Like you didn't tell me that. So she's like going through like a spiral in her head, like, what is going on? And so it will come out. Regardless, some things I just forget, honestly. You just don't even remember to tell anybody.
It's those darn holes, Farida. It's those
Yes,
darn
it's the
holes.
holes. I mean, like my
Yes.
brain just developed like 3 years ago. But yeah, it's you just your kids are going through things, and that's why I love what I do is because I get to be in the middle ground with everything, right? So I see the parents' point of view because I work with parents literally every single day, 24/7. I work with parents and their kids all the time. And then I see the kids' point of view because I was a child. I'm still growing up. I once I hit even once I'm like, oh yeah, you're absolutely mature, you're like 50 years old. I'm still growing up. Okay. I'm still going through life. We're all learning. And then the second part is I have the professional background in the cybersecurity aspect space. So I can see both worlds. I can see the world where no people do not understand what's going on with cybersecurity and threat intelligence and hackers and predators. And then also I see the world where people don't know what's going on in kids' brains and kids' worlds and what's in how they actually experience the world. Because I see a lot of articles and a lot of tips online, and I'm like, this is so cold. It's disconnected from reality. It's giving tips from a place of like a lab, like a lab scientist versus actually feeling it as a parent, feeling it as someone who's been through it. Because a lot of these people who write the articles, it's not that they don't know, it's that, and I see myself in them as well. You're trained as a professional to think a certain way, to say certain things, to do certain things. But if they were to look deeper into their own experiences, they would have a different way of saying it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is why what you do really does resonate with the community at large because it is so real. It's like, it's not a theory. It is actually what you have been through and what you have seen, coupled with what propelled you to gain more knowledge as
Yes.
in your education. And then it turned around into this beautiful help for parents, which is just, I think, amazing. Let's talk quickly about some just age appropriate safety measures for parents. So you have even 4-year-olds. I mean, some people allow screens younger. You know what I mean? Like, so how do we, your experience that you mainly focus on is when you are 16. So that obviously is very different than when you were 8 versus, let's say, when you were 5. So let's just say kindergarten age because, maybe a tablet or educational things are coming into play.
So I like to group it in three different groupings. And one is up to 7 years old, then 7 to 14, then 14 to 21. And so up to 7 years old, that's like the play area where you're mostly playing, you're showing them the world through the play lens. I always recommend games like Net Smarts by Nick Mick, Be Internet Awesome by Google. FBI has safe online surfing. So those type of games, videos online, talking to them, um, just that's the way that you deal with that. When they're younger, of course, we have a screen time and how much screen time did they get and how to operate in screen time. I did a webinar with one of my favorite brands, Sensical, and they're from Common Sense Networks. They have a streaming app, a safe streaming app for younger kids. So if you want safe streaming for your kids under 10 years old, use that app. They have a safe TikTok feed that has like a limited scroll and a really good educational scroll. So that's one if you have kids up to 7 years old. And then I have a webinar on them. So if you go to my resources, you'll see the screen time webinar. And then from 7 to 14, that is this is your teaching age. It's like you're giving them all of the teaching, right? And so this is when your apps come in, of course, when it comes to safety and of course when you're talking to them, this is when you build that trust. This is when you build the I went through this, and so this is what I learned. And you don't even have to just say, so I want just leave it at that. Just tell them stories from your childhood, connect with them, show them things, have conversations. And then from 14 to 21, that is when you become their friend. So you're moving from the like you're managing their life and you're teaching and managing everything to okay, now I'm your friend. I'm not saying that, especially if you're homeschooling, course, there are going to be aspects where you're still managing things in their life. They're still a child in all respects. But when it comes to the online space, when it comes to how you're teaching them to be safe online, you're not necessarily teaching at this stage. You're just their mentor and you're reinforcing what you taught before. If you felt like, oh my God, Fareedah, I did not know that there's a play and then the teach and then a friend stage, you know it, but you're not thinking of it like in a logical standpoint when it comes to internet safety. It's okay. It's not like you can't have a moment where you teach at 15, but you all know raising kids that at 15 years old, it's, they have a mind of their own. They're just like, why are you talking to me?
Yes, and we also know that in the same household, you can have one like that, and you can have one that's like, yes, please tell me your knowledge so that I don't have to make mistakes that I don't have to
Exactly.
make. I mean, it's just, and then you can have a third, and they're just all over the place, and so you don't even know what you're doing by your youngest. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. It's so interesting to
Everybody.
have all the different personalities, and what works with one kid and what is fair and right for one kid is not fair and right for a next kid. And I think sometimes as homeschool parents, we kind of get this idea, this formula, and not understanding that, okay, yeah, we can all do the same curriculum and it works, but it works in different ways. And our kids are, we just have to be personable with our kids. And you think that that was like so intuitive, but I'm telling you, it is not. It is not. I have to stop and be like, why am I even saying that? Where is that coming from? Is that just a tape that rolled in my head because that's what I was told? I mean, we as parents can be sometimes so unaware of where we're parenting from, whether it is, just we're doing what was always done and like not even taking into effect that it didn't work really well anyway. So why do we keep perpetuating those cycles? And the do as I say, not as I do, like it doesn't work. I mean, has really never worked. But even with our kids, knowing that as a family, you can come up with, parameters and safety measures and times, but then each kid is individual, and we really have to make sure that we're looking at our kids individually, especially when it comes to something like this, because one kid could get on there, never want to talk to anybody, and it's not an issue. And then another kid who we have no idea is some kind of deficit inside that we are totally unaware of because we have work and schooling and other children, or even if it's just one, that is, I mean, it still happens. Like it's not, you can get inside your kid that, it takes looking at people individually, and we have to apply that same to our kids. And it's easy to get out of that.
This is why I always say that you're the expert in your child, right? So no matter what I say, no matter what someone on the internet says, whatever article you read, video you see, if something doesn't feel like it applies to you and your family, and you have a gut feeling of like, no, I don't, just no. Even what I said today, especially what I said today, you don't apply it because you are the one who knows the most about your situation, the way that you behave, your child behaves, your interactions, what works for you, the goals that you have for your child's life, the goals that they have for themselves as they get older. It really does depend on the family. And so there are certain things where someone may say, like, your child should never have social media. That may not apply to your 16-year-old child who built a business and is selling their crocheting items online. That doesn't apply to them, but it does apply to your second child who's like 10 years old and is begging to be a YouTuber. And you're like, absolutely not. Not right now. You're unhinged. You're crazy. I don't want you online right now. So you know what works for your child and you go with that. You are the expert in your child. You don't have to be an expert in technology. You don't have to be an expert in cybersecurity, threat intelligence, gaming, social media, whatever it is to keep your child safe online. Your experiences online, your experiences offline, your experiences as a kid, your experiences as an adult, your experiences right now in this present form, that is what will protect your child online, not you being an expert in everything. If you happen to be an expert in anything I mentioned or anything that can directly help protect your kids online, that's a bonus. That's not needed. It's a bonus. It's phenomenal. It's great. And you may have a different perspective because of it. But it does not mean that if you don't have that, that you're like, oh my God, I'm behind. I need to like brush up on it and everything. You have way too many things on your plate already. You don't need to add on trying to become a safety expert and know the new slang and all the new apps that are out there.
So I don't need to sign up for an online course on how for cybersecurity in order to keep my kids safe.
No, you do not have to. Like, even I'm someone who has courses on how to protect your kids on Roblox, how to protect your kids from predators, especially sextortion predators. There are many things out there that you can learn, and those can be very, very helpful if you need it. But you don't need to be an expert at it. And that's what I even say in my courses, in my membership. You don't have to be an expert. This is just to guide you on things that you may be missing, things that are most people don't really talk about. Here's ways to deal with that. But if you feel like, look, this is I don't need that help right now. I need something different. There are many different ways that you can ask questions. You can listen to podcasts. You can talk to your partner. If you're co-parenting, if you're with your partner currently, you can talk to your therapist. I believe all of those are ways to keep your kids safe online. You don't have to directly sign up for. I don't have a cybersecurity course, but even if I did, I would be like, yeah, you don't have to do all that. Like, and then people ask me, like, oh, dude, what's the new slang? You don't have to know the new slang. If your child is saying it in front of you, then you can go Google it really quickly or ask them what is that. And then that's how you know. You don't need to know all the new apps, right? All you need to know is what your child cares about. So the app that they're begging for, go online, go to Common Sense Media, look at expert reviews, parent reviewed, kid reviews, see if it's safe, type in the app name, safety, kid safety, type that in and do research that way.
Before we go, Frida, let's just share with our listeners your community where they've listened to this podcast. They're like, I need more, or this is, I see myself needing this in the future, or we're going to have to start again, fresh. So, how can they find the things that you offer for your community?
So I am Cyber Fareedah everywhere. If you go to cyberfareedah.com, you'll see the Protect Kids Online Resource Library. Everything that I talked about today, the screen time webinar, the resources, Common Sense Media, finding safer games, protect your kids from predators, Roblox, Minecraft, all of it is inside of my Protect Kids Online Resource Library. It's a free library. And then I'm Cyber Fareedah on all social media accounts, and my links in my bio have everything that I mentioned as well.
Wonderful. And we will make sure to put all of those links in our show notes so that our listeners can find more about the things that you offer. And this is just like the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I had to control myself. I had to like, I wanted to go so much deeper into so many things, but it's like, okay, no, we have to at least get parents thinking about these things and just being aware that metacognition, thinking about what you're thinking about, like knowing that once we can we can't unknow what we know. So let's delve in and put those safety measures in place so that we can protect our kids, whether they think they're into it or not. It may be some the foundation that you lay for when they go to college, for when they're out of your home, for when they do get into cybersecurity and like, man, I had no idea. And we're like, well, yeah, this is part of the problem. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me and just giving just a smidge of what parents, need to be aware of and all of the resources that you offer on your website for parents to access. As a parent, I really appreciate all that you're doing in your life work with this.
Well, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys. Until next time. Bye bye.